The RTS rail link connecting Singapore and Johor Bahru gets the go-ahead to resume with a new completion date of 2026.
Singapore is battling a third wave of imported COVID-19 cases, with more than 100 reported in the past month. And the Singaporean Claire Huang conducts Ode to Joy for a special Beethoven 360 concert you won't want to miss. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
And I'm Hsien. Now you can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
And it's official, work can resume on the rapid transit system link between Woodlands and Johor Bahru. This morning, Prime Minister Loong, his Malaysian counterpart Muhyiddin Yassin and their transport ministers attended a ceremony held at the causeway. Based on the new agreement, the project is set to be completed at the end of 2026, 2 years later than first planned. Malaysia's Transport Minister Hsien said that ticket prices will be the same on both sides, after taking into account the conversion rates. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, more than 300,000 people use the causeway every day.
The project itself is valuable, it's good for us because I think it will help to ease the congestion on the causeway, which everybody knows about since at least before the COVID situation. And it'll make commuting easier. Workers can come to Singapore to work. Singaporeans going to Johor or going to other parts of Malaysia can take the RTS link instead of using the causeway. It should ease the congestion and make it more convenient for people to go back and forth.
When it's ready, the RTS link will carry up to 10,000 passengers per hour in each direction. And it will be a standalone light rail transit system instead of using the same trains as the Thomson East Coast MRT line. According to Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung, the link will be well integrated with the rest of the transport network.
Convenience is particularly important. So in the bilateral agreement, both sides actually committed that our terminus station on both sides should actually should be well served by our local domestic transport system. So in the case of Singapore, our station, the RTS station, will be next to the Woodlands North Station of the Thomson East Coast Line, which has been open, which means by the time RTS is open, commuters can hop off RTS and go straight to Woodlands North Station and travel to many parts of Singapore.
Separately, Singapore's aviation industry has taken a severe hit, with global travel coming to a standstill in recent months. Mr. Ong said that he's focusing his efforts on helping the industry recover from COVID-19.
COVID has decimated the entire aviation sector. Yeah. So I think in the coming weeks, coming months, top priority is really what steps can we take to revive our aviation hub. MFA, MOT and various ministries are working together. We are working on negotiating reciprocal green lane with various countries who have managed to bring down their transmission. So I think going forward, let's hope more countries are able to do it. We can negotiate more reciprocal green lanes, but if we can do more, go beyond that, we should really consider that.
Moving on, an update on the COVID-19 situation here. 278 new cases were confirmed today, taking Singapore's total to over 51,800.
More details will be shared later tonight, but the Health Ministry preliminarily reported that today's count includes 4 community cases comprising a Singaporean and 3 work pass holders. There were also 4 imported cases.
Now, on imported cases, Singapore is seeing a third wave of imported COVID-19 cases, with more than 100 such cases confirmed in the past month. Including today's numbers, a total of 692 imported cases were confirmed here. The number of daily imported cases had earlier dropped to 0 as travel restrictions tightened in Singapore and around the world. But on June 15th, the COVID-19 Multi-Ministry Task Force announced that more long-term pass holders would be able to return during Phase 2 of the country's reopening.
And on June 30th, Singapore saw its first imported case in more than 2 weeks. Another 106 cases were reported up until yesterday, and they were imported from 9 different countries. More than half of them came from India, followed by the Philippines, and the rest from countries like Indonesia, Pakistan and the US.
We have journalist Timothy Goh to discuss this further. Timothy, for a start, explain to us the process that travellers have to do once they enter Singapore. What do they have to go through?
So right before travellers want to come back to Singapore, they first need to get approval from the authorities. After they've been approved, when they come back to Singapore, they'll be issued a 14-day stay-home notice. Now, depending on where they have been prior to the entry to Singapore, they can serve the stay-home notice in different places. For example, if they've been in Australia, aside from Victoria, New Zealand, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, Brunei, Macau, or mainland China, then they can serve the stay-home notice at their own homes. But anyone else will have to stay at a dedicated facility. And if you're not a Singapore citizen or permanent resident, then you'll need to pay for your stay at these facilities. And towards the end of your stay at these facilities, travellers will have to undergo a swab test for the coronavirus. They'll be notified via SMS or through some other method to let them know where to go and when, and they'll have to take private transport to get swab tested.
Timothy, on that note, right, the Straits Times readers have also asked this question: why aren't travellers swabbed upon their arrival in Singapore instead of, a few days before their stay-home notice period ends?
Many experts have spoken about this before, and the general consensus is that the coronavirus itself is not as easy to pick up in the earlier days of infection because people tend to have a lower viral load. So if you were to swab someone early on, there's a risk that you may miss them out and then wrongly clear them and give them this sense of false security that they are uninfected.
Timothy, can we have a better understanding of who are these travellers who are coming into Singapore? Under what circumstances are they entering here?
So first, I need to clarify that all these imported cases, at least, have all been long-term pass holders rather than, say, tourists or anything like that. And a majority of these people have been work pass holders. And, you've got a mixture of countries. They're coming from 9 different countries. The most number of cases have come from India so far, followed by the Philippines, which sort of represents our, our foreign or migrant worker population in Singapore as well. And of course, you've got a number of Singapore citizens and permanent residents that are coming back as well, and dependents also who are trying to get back to their loved ones.
What is being done to ensure that the situation is kept under control and that the number of imported cases remains manageable, Timothy?
So I'll speak to some experts on this, and the general idea right now is that the current quarantine procedures are sufficient because you quarantine the person, and if they test positive, then because of the quarantine, they haven't been in contact with anyone else, and so they haven't been able to spread the infection. So you've essentially isolated the threat already, and you can quickly treat it and deal with it later on in a hospital or another kind of facility. Aside from that, however, what some people have suggested is that perhaps we could consider making use of the new rapid test kits that are being developed to test people upon their arrival into Singapore, to remove the need to even quarantine them in the first place and get this threat out of the way at the very start. But what we have right now is considered to be sufficient.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Timothy, for coming onto the show to speak with us. And we were speaking to journalist Timothy Goh on Singapore's third wave of imported COVID-19 cases. In other local news, 17 town councils have been officially formed following GE 2020. The National Development Ministry said today they comprise the new Sengkang Town Council, 11 town councils with changes in their boundaries and 5 with their town areas unchanged. The ministry also issued an order under the Town Councils Act to put into effect the formation of these 17 town councils, which were set up at the requests of the MPs. Under the Act, town councils have up to 90 days from the date of the order to take over the management of areas to be transferred. The Sengkang Town Council and the 11 reconstituted town councils will take over with effect from October 28th. Town councils can also mutually agree to an earlier takeover date.
A new mobile app designed to help domestic violence victims receive aid quickly from social services agency PAVE is currently undergoing testing. Since June, the app has been piloted in several neighborhoods, including in Jurong, Nee Soon, Yio Chu Kang and Tanjong Pagar. For its pilot tests, PAVE recruited 57 volunteers and grassroots leaders to use the app to report abuse cases. So once a case is reported, PAVE's administrators use the app, which can detect locations, to find volunteers nearby to investigate the incident. And as first responders, these volunteers will then input case details into the app, which the agency administrators can immediately review before assigning additional support to the victims.
The Indonesian woman who abandoned her newborn baby boy in Thai King Gardens was charged today with exposure and abandonment of a child below 12 years old. If found guilty, she can be jailed for up to 7 years and fined. The 29-year-old woman is said to be the infant's mother and is accused of committing the offense at around 5 p.m. on Monday. She cannot be named due to a gag order to protect the child's identity. Officers are looking into the identity of the baby's father. The woman's bail was set at $20,000 and her case has been adjourned to August 13th.
Over in Hong Kong, the government has U-turned on its decision to fully ban dining in at eateries after it observed inconveniences to blue-collar workers. Construction workers and cleaners were spotted having their takeaway meals outdoors yesterday in heavy rain or inside toilets or storerooms.
So from tomorrow, eateries can run at half capacity, with each table capped at 2 diners. The 1.5 meter rule between tables still applies. The government also reinstated the order for eateries to provide only takeaways between 6 p.m. and 5 a.m.
The ban on dining in was part of Hong Kong's toughest measures yet to curb its new outbreak. The city has recorded more than 100 new cases for the 9th consecutive day. Kicking in yesterday and enforced for at least 7 days, these measures include banning gatherings of more than 2 people, as well as making face masks mandatory in public places, indoors and outdoors.
The government also tightened testing and quarantine arrangements for sea and air crew members. Sports centres and swimming pools were added to the list of venues ordered to shut for 7 days until August 4th.
To tell us more is the Straits Times' Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang, who joins us from Hong Kong. Claire, will the government's decision to still allow dining in at eateries end up backfiring as people can essentially still dine out? And when you were last on the show, you mentioned that these places were actually one source of the new outbreak.
Yes, that's right. So the fact remains that eateries are a coronavirus hotspot, and I put it this way, it's like COVID central because many of the eateries here are small and crammed. I've actually been to a bistro when they haven't had that full ban yet, and clearly the tables were like this apart. It was like definitely not spaced 1.5 meters apart. And to be honest, the F&B operators, their hands are tied as well because you've got to pay rent. The landlords are not reducing the rent. So, you've got these F&B owners who will pack in as many customers as they can without looking too crowded. Does it make sense? So the government did a U-turn on the complete ban on dining in at eateries, and from tomorrow it will allow people to have their breakfasts and lunches and even tea in the eateries, but you have to take away from 6 p.m. onwards, between 6 to 5 a.m., 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. And each eatery is supposed to run at half capacity. You can only sit up to 2 customers at each table. So this is supposed to be a relaxation of the initial ban that is now still in place. So from tomorrow, I can go out and eat out.
Right. But Claire, apart from, of course, the ban on them backpedaling on this ban, there are stricter measures, of course, still in place. How did that go? You know, are people, if not everyone, even are most people abiding by these regulations?
So the government rolled out some of the toughest measures yesterday, which included full ban on dining, and only takeaways allowed. So, and also they also ordered everyone to wear masks in indoor and outdoor public places. That kicked in also yesterday. And then you have got a 2-person cap for public gatherings. And, you know, you've got the government saying that, you know, it would open 19 community halls, which it did. It opened these community halls across the city between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. To cater to those who did not have a place to lunch. But you see, some of the workers found these halls to be inconvenient or very far away. And then yesterday and today, blue-collar workers, you know, your cleaners, construction workers, where are they going to lunch?
Yeah.
You know, they were spotted having lunch outdoors, you know, in areas like parks, gardens, by the roads, but perhaps by construction sites, some of them in toilets or even storerooms, you know. So what happened was that yesterday it rained in the afternoon while they were having lunch, so they had to scramble for shelter. Not very sanitary, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Right, of course. Well, speaking of sanitization and everything, given cramped living quarters in Hong Kong, a full-scale lockdown is virtually impossible. A lawmaker even called a lockdown inhumane and impractical, especially for the poor in Hong Kong. But how much stricter can rules get before it's actually defined as a lockdown?
Well, by definition, it means a full ban on going out, unless for essentials. And Singapore's been there, even though it's not described that way. Over in Hong Kong, we have some room to go before that. Previously, health experts here were divided, so there were suggestions going on, right? And some suggested that it might be time to ban people from going out temporarily for a short time, you know, maybe a week or something. Just to rein in the COVID numbers. But, you know, there are a few problems with that. First of all, is because it's a drastic step to take. There are people who will have to go out, you know, jobs, and it affects employers and so on. And it is also, secondly, is the government's position to be business friendly. You know, Hong Kong is a very business friendly place, and you will have businesses and employers lobbying them. So, you know, although the government has recently been slammed by various sectors for, you know, forcing some businesses to close. And we also need to remember that with every option that you choose, there comes a set of its own problems. If you're going to ban people from venturing out, they have to stay at home. People in Hong Kong don't usually stay at home because it's cramped and small. Yep. You ban people from having meals at eateries means more rubbish everywhere, which is what we're finding now, you know. All the dustbins outside are full, and then it attracts lots of, you know, flies and things like that. So the numbers are up this month, but particularly so this month. But the fact remains that even though we've passed the 3,000 mark in total tally, Hong Kong's death rate, fatality rate has gone up, but it's still manageable. The numbers are still smaller than many other places.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Claire. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and of course, stay safe over there. That was Hong Kong correspondent at the Straits Times, Claire Huang.
Now, still on Hong Kong, 4 students involved in a recently disbanded pro-independence group were arrested yesterday under the controversial new national security law. The arrests are the first to target public political figures since the legislation was imposed on Hong Kong by Beijing last month. Police said 3 men and 1 woman aged between 16 and 21 were arrested on suspicion of organizing and inciting secession.
The Philippines now has more COVID-19 cases than China, with the health ministry reporting that hospitals are close to being overwhelmed. Yesterday, the Philippines recorded around 1,800 new infections, bringing its total to more than 85,400. By comparison, according to data gathering firm Wildometer, China has a total of just over 84,000.
Meanwhile, in Australia, it has suffered its worst day of coronavirus infections, with Victoria State reportedly recording 723 new cases. This has dashed hopes that the lockdown in Melbourne was bringing the outbreak under control.
Classical music fans are in for a real treat tonight because Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with its huge finale Ode to Joy will be brought to life in a virtual performance to celebrate International Friendship Day.
Singaporean Claire Huang, chief conductor of the Nuremberg Symphony Orchestra, will lead more than 1,000 participants as part of a global campaign marking Beethoven's 250th birth anniversary. Now here's a preview of this special performance.
When I heard about the project Beethoven in the Garden and the Ode to Joy, which celebrates universal brotherhood and that sense of togetherness, it seemed to make sense. And this being the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth, as well as me being a lover of the music, it all came together, and therefore I was very happy to be part of the project.
Maestro Wong Kar-chun is very young, I think only about 34 years old, but he's already a national treasure. He's the first Singaporean to have been appointed as the principal conductor of an orchestra outside Singapore.
So every single person in this project has contributed to its success. And these people involve not only the musicians, our wonderful orchestra players, our wonderful singers, our soloists, and also at the same time, the team from the German embassy, who has put together a wonderful group of sponsors at very short notice, who have all rallied together to say, let us support something like this.
Beethoven 360 will premiere on the Straits Times' Facebook and YouTube channels at 8 p.m. tonight.
That's right. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Of course, Selamat Hari Raya Haji to all our Muslim viewers, and we'll see you next week.